Good evening and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Poland scrambled its fighter jets following the threat coming from Russian drones operating over western Ukraine, next to the Polish border. The airspace over Lublin has been closed and the air defense systems has been out on high alert. All this as NATO launched Operation Eastern Sentry following the Zapad military exercises next to the Polish border. To discuss the reality on NATO's eastern flank, I'm joined by Colonel Jon Sweet, former Intelligence Engagement Division Director, U.S. European Command. Good evening, sir, and thank you for joining us this evening.
Hey, good evening, Anna. Thank you for having me back on the show.
My pleasure. So, Russia and Belarus have begun major joint military drills on NATO's eastern borders, just days after Poland shot down Russian attack drones that entered its airspace. Against this backdrop, in its Eastern Sentry, the NATO operational move on the symbolic show of unity, and the Zapad military exercises next to the Polish border. So, do you think it will have a tangible deterrent effect on Russia, or rather it's only more of a symbolic show?
Well, first, I think there will be a tangible effect. You don't just deploy 40,000 ground forces along your border with Belarus and not get some sort of a response, okay? But let's also remember that the Zapad exercise is an exercise that occurs every 2 years. It was canceled in 2023. The last exercise was 2021, which NATO and Poland now feels though was rehearsal exercise for the invasion of Ukraine. So there is a lot of significance to what the exercise can be. But what we also know is that the exercise 2025 is significantly smaller than 2021, with about 30,000 participants, 2,000 of which are Russian in Belarus.
Well, I must say that reading about the sirens being called off in the eastern part of Poland and closing the airspace in this eastern part and Lublin and closing the airport in Lublin is very disturbing and it's very worrying here in Warsaw. So we try to read the Russian strategy, and how do you read it? Is it calculated to provoke Poland, to tire up in Polish air forces in the long run, or to get the Polish society scared?
I think it's threefold, and I'm talking about the actual intrusion of Polish airspace. The first is it was a directed incident. I agree with the Polish Prime Minister and also with NATO. It wasn't an accident. 19 drones crossing into Polish airspace is not an accident. It's intended. It's deliberate. 5 of those drones we know actually went into southern Poland to the NATO airfield from which supplies are funneled in and out of Ukraine. So that was deliberate, and I suspect that it was probably for targeting purposes and also to measure the response that NATO and Poland would have in order to defend that particular air base, either with air policing or through an integrated air defense system. Okay. But the third objective also was, yes, to send a message both to Poland but also to NATO. And it's to create doubt as far as what NATO is willing to do next. As you know, Article 4 proceedings are underway, but you don't have a united NATO going into those proceedings. You have 2 outliers, and those outliers being Slovakia and Hungary hold a veto vote. And that veto vote may be exercised because of the cheap energy that both of those countries are getting from Russia right now. So the deliberations, the outcome of the deliberations are something we need to be very concerned about how that works out.
Which brings us to the next question. Is NATO prepared for the potential risk of escalation, and will it push us to activate the Article 5?
Yeah, so NATO's been rehearsing different types of scenarios for a number of years for the defense of Eastern Europe. Particularly, as you're aware, the Slovakia Gap is one of those contingencies that NATO's been very much aware of. And as you look at the footprint right now within Poland, particularly from the U.S. side, there's over 10,000 American soldiers that are stationed in Poland now. And that includes the 5th Corps headquarters for the United States military. It also includes a combat aviation brigade and a number of rotational units. So U.S. ground forces are present, in addition to a brigade of German tanks that was deployed to Lithuania in the July timeframe. And you mentioned earlier in your broadcast the Eastern Century air policing that's taken effect. So a deterrent force is present, and there are plans to repel an aggressive conventional attack into Eastern Europe, whether it be the Slovakia Gap or Poland or one of the other Baltic states. But at the end of the day, it's designed, again, to intimidate. It's designed to cause doubt within the NATO allies as to whether they will come together to defend one another. And right now, what we've seen is the answer is yes, particularly through air policing. But what we saw during this latest incident of 19 drones is just that, drones. What we haven't seen is the threat of ballistic missiles, and we haven't seen the threat of fast movers, the jet aircraft. Is NATO prepared to execute a mission to shoot them down? And is there an integrated air defense? And I would say that work needs to be done and are going fast as they can. And the proceedings of Article 4 are going to dictate how that gets implemented.
Do you think Russia is likely to pursue and to continue probing and provoking the West, also finding out what it can get away with if Washington continues to hesitate in response to these Russian provocations?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We just saw it, today, as you just mentioned in your news broadcast, where a Russian drone penetrated Romanian airspace. Now, again, it's hard to believe that that's an accident, particularly, 3 days after a major incursion into Polish airspace. So, no, they're going to continue to probe NATO, if you will, NATO airspace. They're looking for, right? They're looking for how NATO responds. Will they launch air assets like we've seen with F-16s and MiG aircraft and other type of aircraft, as far as the Eastern Century, but also the Baltic police too, as far as those patrols. But also what they're looking for is, where are the radars? Where are those land-based radars that are going to guide Patriot missile batteries or other types of air defense batteries towards those targets as they're coming in? So no, these are deliberate provocations. And again, it's intended to gather intelligence, but also to send a message to NATO. And that message primarily is stop supporting Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. So question is, where is the red line? And given the salami tactics by Putin, tiring up constantly, provoking and bordering countries, what will be the act of war? And is Russia testing the allies, simply?
Absolutely. Russia's looking for that red line. They're looking to see how far they can push that envelope. That red line is going to occur when someone is killed, okay, or someone is wounded, or a base or a facility is targeted deliberately with, that's where it's going to be. And right now, and it's difficult sometimes to sit back and listen to some of senior NATO leadership, and I'm saying on the civilian side, saying, well, it was an intrusion, but it was over an area that wasn't populated. Well, they crossed our border, but they didn't really do anything. That is expanding and enabling Russia to go further by letting them cross across your border. Let's think for a minute what Russia would do right now if a NATO drone or a NATO aircraft crossed into Kaliningrad airspace or crossed into Belarusian airspace, demonstrating hostile intent, possibly to missile launch sites in the Belarusian territory. They would be shot down more. I mean, I can almost guarantee they would be shot down. A reaction force would occur, and there would be immediate reaction. Putin is confident that NATO does not want to take action. Rather, they want to try to limit his abilities and what he is doing, and he is gambling that they won't. So right now it's just drones, but what do we do when it's ballistic missiles or cruise missiles and aircraft. And honestly, that has to be something that is considered and discussed in Article 4 proceedings, so we don't get to Article 5.
Precisely. So the maneuvers known as Zapad exercises, Zapad drills, will last until Tuesday. Donald Tusk, Polish Prime Minister, describes them as very aggressive from a military doctrine perspective. For instance, Iskander missiles were deployed right next to the Polish border. So what is the goal of Russia and Belarus here? What message do they send?
So I see the exercise as threefold. The first is just what you said. It's a show of force. It's a demonstration. It's meant to intimidate the West from taking any type of action, offensive or defensive. And what we're seeing is the static display of ballistic missiles. Okay, and we also know that there's nuclear-capable missiles, tactical nuclear missiles that are stored in Minsk. So that is meant to intimidate. That is meant as a demonstration, as a show of force of look what we can do. The second objective of the exercise is to increase the interoperability between the two militaries, both Belarus and Russia. Okay, yes, they have similar equipment, they have similar language, they have similar ammunition, but working together at the command, staff, and the troop levels is meant to increase interoperability. But third, and I think really in this case probably more important, is this is all about appeasing Lukashenko. Okay, he fears Poland. He fears Poland, which is why he asked for the tactical nuclear weapons to be stored in Minsk, which is why they're doing the exercise again this year, even though it was canceled last year in 2023 when the exercise would have taken place in Russia. Now it's taking place in Belarus, that off-cycle period. So this is to appease Lukashenko, actually, who is afraid, again, I believe, he's afraid of Poland, what Poland's capable of doing. He's turned to Russia to present that deterrent.
Well, for this part, Putin is not the only one to appease Lukashenko. Also, President Donald Trump recently sent him a letter and entered in some sort of conversation, at least securing the freeing of many opposition leaders in Belarus, which is a good sign. Thank you so much. And with this, we have to conclude this conversation, but thank you so much for joining us. Colonel Jon Sweet, former Intelligence Engagement Division Director, U.S. European Command. Once again, thank you.
Okay, Anna, thank you very much for having me back on the show.
Our pleasure. And thank you for watching World News here on TVP World. Please stay tuned for more news to follow.